Okay, members, ladies and gentlemen, anybody else? Welcome to this evening's Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 18th of October at 6:30. We've all been here since 5:30, so we're ready to roll. So we have guests here, so I have to look over the top of my reading glasses, otherwise it just can't see a damn thing. So we have Danielle, two Kates, and a Susanna. So welcome. These are ladies from Trees, Forgotten Places, Tree Research, the good Trees for Cities. That's it. But we're properly introduced later. So first item on the agenda, minutes. Do I have your authorisation as chairman to sign the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 13th of September 2021 as a correct record of the proceedings? Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutions.
Councillor Clark.
Councillor Clark, no substitutions. And what was it you just told me? Melanie Powell was going to be presenting, but she is unwell. Additional agenda items, there are none. Disclosure of interest, I would probably think, no, unless you know different. No? Okay. On to item 5, Forgotten Places, a presentation by Trees for Cities. Deborah, do you wish to introduce the start?
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman. I think we were going to start off with the overview and scrutiny progress on the environment strategy. So I was going to start off with that report. That's all right.
Okay.
And just begin that and then introduce Trees for Cities as part of that report, and present on a section of that, and then carry on with the report when they finished. I think that was the plan we were going to do. So this is an update on progress made on the environment strategy, which was agreed in 2020. And to start off with, the first section is about staff resources. As many of us will know, the role of the Environmental Policy Manager is currently vacant and under review to take into account the general restructure of the council staffing. And I think Ben Hook is going to update us later on at the end of the report on the next steps with that and the environment strategy as a whole. So on to projects. So there's a variety of projects listed as part of the report. And the first one, which is our major project that's ongoing at the moment, is about Bexhill tree planting and the work that we've been doing with Bexhill iTree Study and volunteers from the Bexhill Environment Group, Coombe Valley Countryside Park, and a variety of other volunteers and campaign people, councillors. And I'm very happy to welcome Trees for Cities and their colleagues who are going to give us an update on what they're doing with the tree canopy and the plan for planting lots of trees in Bexhill. So I'm going to hand over to Suzanne Simmons, and Kate Sheldon, and Kate Sparrow and Danielle Hill, sorry. Welcome to you. Thank you very much for coming today, and they're going to talk you through the project.
Thank you very much for inviting us along. It's a great pleasure to be here. We are incredibly excited about this project. So I'm Kate Sheldon, I'm from Trees for Cities, and Suzanne is also from Trees for Cities. Other Kate is from Forest Research, and Danny is from Tree Economics. And we've joined together through a really exciting project, Forgotten Places. So yes, it works. Thank you. So I'll give you an overview of the project, first of all, and then I'm going to hand over to these two. They're the kind of brain boxes of the strategic programme that we're going to be delivering in Bexhill. And then Suzanne's going to be talking more about what Trees for Cities as a charity can offer as well. So it's quite a complex partnership project, and I'll talk a little bit about the partnership shortly. But just to give an overview of the programme, the Trees for Cities is a national tree planting charity, and we work in all sorts of towns and cities around the country. And we focus all of our work towards places with low canopy cover and high deprivation. But the idea about the forgotten places tag, if you like, is that we were also looking for places that have been overlooked for funding, particularly from big national government tree planting schemes. And when we set about putting this project together, we did quite a bit of mapping of places that fell into those criteria. And we found that there was a really close correlation with coastal towns and cities. And so this Forgotten Places programme is the result of that. And essentially we'll be working in 7 forgotten places. It's around England. It's England only because it's funding through DEFRA, through their Green Recovery Challenge Fund. So what we're talking to you about now is that it's an 18-month programme that's going to be working in 7 forgotten places. But Bexhill, we're going to be doing some extra work. We're going to be doing quite a lot more strategic work, as well as the grassroots activities that I'll be covering off a bit later. So there's a list of the partners and a summary of our roles. So Trees for Cities is the project lead. We are also a delivery organisation, so we have a kind of a dual role in this project, both as project manager, but also as offering delivery support to all of our council partners. We're also working with Field Studies Council, who are offering a really exciting programme of training and learning and skills development. They'll be creating training guides and doing on-site and digital training over the 18 months. Economics and Forest Research, they'll be explaining a bit more about their programme shortly. And then the Queen's Green Canopy is a funding partner. So I'm sure you're aware of the Queen's Green Canopy project to celebrate the Queen's Jubilee next year. And then underneath that, I've listed the 7 local delivery partners, so Northern District Council is on that list there. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. I know there's a lot of text up there. I thought it would just be useful to show a summary of what the project's all about. So that left-hand column is essentially the outcomes that the funder set and that we interpreted, and that's what we're working towards. The middle column is outputs linked to the programme as a whole, so across all 7 places. And then the column on the right is specific to Bexhill. And we're just working out the detail of that at the moment, but essentially that's how the programme's coming together. Top row, so if you're looking at the top right-hand box, that's basically the tree planting. So we're looking at planting and establishing around 150 trees. We've got standard trees in there, but that is in discussion at the moment. So it may be a combination of standard trees, fruit trees, whips, hedges. So there can be a variety of planting that we deliver there. And all the planting will be done next year, next planting season. So from October 2022 through to February 2023. So there's a bit of time for the others to do their bit of programme work first to help us to identify where those sites will actually be. If you jump to the bottom right, then that list of activities there is really to complement the planting that we will do. Suzanne will be talking a bit more about those in due course. But that's the kind of grassroots activities that we'll be delivering with local people across the entire 18 months. And then that middle column starts off with Tree Cities of the World, and then comes on to the tree planting strategy and the tree planting guidance, which Kate and Danny will talk to you a bit more about. And that's really the strategic layer of the programme. So with all of the places we will be planting and establishing trees. But it's only in Bexhill that we're actually going to be looking in a bit more depth at supporting councils who are declaring climate emergencies, who are declaring carbon reduction targets, to really understand how to go from, say, 12.8%, which I think is your canopy cover currently, up to the 15% that is recommended minimum for urban spaces. What does that actually you know, what's needed, what level of investment and what kind of activities are needed to make that happen on the ground. So that's a strategic program. So I will stop there.
Thanks, Kate. So me and Danny will talk you through our part in the programme, which is a sort of information gathering programme of work practices. So as Kate's already kind of described, coastal areas, coastal urban areas, tend to have a much lower canopy cover. So there are lots of challenges, particularly associated with coastal towns and cities. And this is something that we'd really like to unpick as part of this project by focusing on Bexhill and understanding more about what goes into tree planting and what may be other barriers to that in these areas. So our aim really is to provide a sort of evidence-based approach to strategic tree planting. So what we're really focusing on is gathering as much information as possible, collating research and sort of diving into the sector and the industry to gain an insight into best practice, what works already, perhaps what doesn't work, so that they can be applied to not only Bexhill but other towns in similar situations who also show increasing canopy cover. So I'm going to talk about the IT Eco project. So I know Deborah mentioned it at the beginning, and some of you might already be familiar with it. So at the moment, Forest Research and Economics are leading on a study called the IT Eco study here in Bexhill, and it's been a really wonderful study. We were really lucky today to meet up with some of the volunteers, and it was so nice to have such positive things to say about it. And it sounds like lots of really lovely things were learned and lots of, you know, good skills have been developed as part of collecting that data. So there's lots of really positive things that come out of it. We've been really lucky to have such a nice group to work with. Essentially, in a nutshell, the project was to survey a sample of sites across the urban area of Bexhill, the rural parish boundary and the countryside park, and collect data about the species that we found, the size of the trees, but also the ground cover and the land use. And all that data will be pulled together to produce a report which will hopefully give you a good estimate or a good idea of the makeup of the urban forest of Bexhill. We break it down into 3 different groups. So you've got an urban area, a rural and a countryside park, so that hopefully if we can collect all of the data in time before the leaves fall from the trees, then you can compare the urban area separately from the rural area and that kind of thing. But the data that's going to come out of it essentially is going to be around the structure and composition of the urban forest. So what is the species makeup, what are your most common species, what's the diversity like, also looking at size distribution of trees. We've got lots and lots of large mature trees or lots of small young trees, or what would be lovely is a nice mixture. But then also being able to look at the ecosystem services those trees provide. So that includes things like carbon storage, reducing flooding through avoided surface runoff, and pollution removal, so cleaning the air. And the tool that we use called i3 Eco is able to quantify those benefits in terms of kilograms. So we'll be able to say, you know, such and such kilograms of carbon is stored by the trees of Bexhill, but also put a monetary value on that service as well, which I think is really useful in being able to communicate actually what your current tree stock does, but then also hopefully make really strategic decisions about the future. And it flows really, really nicely into the Forgotten Places project, which is what we're here to talk about today. So Kate's going to talk about kind of how this will flow into Forgotten Places. So, as Danny described, the i3 Eco project is going to give us a good insight into what the urban forest looks like in its current state in Bexhill. And having that information then enables us to go forward with a more strategic mindset, because we know what's here already, how we might need to build on it going forward. So for the Forgotten Places programme in Bexhill, we've got 4 different work packages. which are going to be taking place from now up until March 23. So the first work package is going to be a mapping exercise, and this is going to be looking at identifying opportunities for new tree planting in Bexhill. And it's something that we've already done a little bit of with other councils, and there's lots of extensive data sets out there that we can use, ranging from sort of the more environmental data sets to sort of socio-economic data sets, which will hopefully inform where are the best places to plant, and will enable sort of priority as well. So that's the first exercise. Then work package 2 is going to be more research-based work package. So this is going to be really delving into what information is already out there with regards to how tree planting might be tied to the local economy. And we think this is maybe particularly significant for coastal towns and cities, because of the seasonality of the local economy, and there are particular challenges there, perhaps that maybe trees could potentially fit into. So that's something that we really want to explore further. And we're then going to tie this into the third work package, and this is going to be kind of like a massive document, but a big chunky work package, which is going to be a tree planting guidance document. And this is going to be hopefully really useful for not only Bexhill, but other coastal towns across the UK. There's nothing really like this in place at the moment, and the aim of it really is to provide guidance on species selection, the key considerations for tree planting, what are the main sort of principles of incorporating trees specifically in coastal communities, how do we engage with the local community as well and involve them, and what are perhaps the challenges that may be overcome that are specific to coastal communities. So we're hoping that this will be a very practical document that can be sort of picked up and utilised at whichever stage within the tree planting process the local authority within. And this will then hopefully inform a tree planting strategy. So we want this tree planting strategy to be very informed, realistic targets, not sort of like pie in the sky targets. Like they need to be achievable. They need to be based upon the evidence, what's already here in Bexhill, which we'll know from the ITU project, and through the work packages that we've already presented. And hopefully as well that this will be a really brilliant example to then apply to others.
Hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Simmons, and I'm Projects Director at Trees for Cities. So I'll go into a little bit of detail of how the work packages that have just been described will feed into a delivery package and how Trees for Cities might be able to help support delivery here and to help any areas where you need resources or you need any additional skills or sharing. So as Kate mentioned earlier, we've committed to support you to achieve recognition through Tree Cities of the World, which we'll talk about a little bit later, the initiative, and how we'll deliver one green screen canopy planting event, which will be next autumn, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. We also hope to train at least one tree planting supervisor volunteer as part of this project, and then we'll look at developing and engaging with the community to have a summer event in 2022 to launch the tree planting season, which will come after it. The aim is for us to help boost your resources for delivery of the agreed outputs with this council at Bexhill, and to look at how we can feed the information from the Tree Economics programme into the tree planting programme that's emerging. Part of what we can do, and one of the things that we do best at Trees for Cities, is to help support community engagement, and that will feed into the whole delivery process. we'll also involve ourselves with volunteer supervision and provide urban forest services as and when needed. So if we look at the kind of community engagement services that we can support you with, we can help with community mapping, which has already been started through Treeconomics and Urban Forest Research Programme, but also working closely with our partners here to identify neighbourhood hubs, local groups who are already doing that, and we're having some really good success with that. And then also building on that, looking at community outreach, so we can help introduce communities to the initial project ideas and to feed information to communities, get feedback from them on what we're thinking about, and translating that into easy to understand ways of communicating. But also consulting with local communities, having drop-in sessions, inviting people to provide their ideas, to ask us questions or ask ourselves any questions. And then from that, we'll start to support development of events, planning and delivery. So we look at safe, inclusive and seasonal activity across the year in the next 18 months, and cover quite a wide variety of scales. And depending on what sites emerge from the study, we'll be focusing on those local communities. From that then, we'll be looking at volunteer recruitment, vision, and then help people understand and learn how to actually plant the trees themselves through demonstrations. There's a few images of some of the work that we do. These are our standard tree planting and some urban open spaces using our standard detailing. And then we also have drop-in sessions, and we show people hands-on how to get their hands dirty and how to physically plant those trees with the hope that they'll look after those trees once they're in the ground and engage when they become their trees and not become your trees. So the urban forest services that we provide support the project site scoping that will emerge through the studies that are being done, and we'll look at helping support site selection and analysis of how the sites might support the trees that we're proposing, look at opportunities to those sites, and we'll look at historical documents, planning documents, anything desktop. What we can do is we create bespoke urban woodland and tree planting plan, so it has to fit the site, so it's the right tree, right place, approach, and that includes species selection and specification, sourcing tree stock from British and local tree sources wherever possible. We'll also support the urban forest team that we've got. We'll support your teams, and we'll also support any community engagement volunteer teams in getting the trees planted. And then we can also look at how we might maintain these trees and come up with a process for ensuring that perhaps local people are watering and taking care of the wardens of the trees in their local area. So just these are some of the larger scale wood planting projects that we do, so we can get quite a lot of people out on site, digging holes, getting their hands dirty, getting stuck in the trees in the local spaces. And they've always been really good fun, very well attended. So I said I'd talk a little bit about the Queen's Green Canopy. You may have seen this launched in the last couple of weeks. The Queen planted a tree in Balmoral, and this is an initiative aimed to leave a legacy of tree canopy cover across the four corners of the UK and the four nations. And it's aimed to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. So we will be running one project, and that will be dedicated to the Queen's Green Canopy, who are one of our project members. And the background to that and the supporting principles behind the Queen's Green Canopy very much aligned with Trees for Cities principles. So there'll be particular focus on supporting urban and most disadvantaged communities, plant trees, also places where they don't have trees to plant. So we're working with charities, local youth groups, local organisations, and helping support landowners to find the right place to plant those trees. And then the Tree Cities of the World initiative it's an international recognition, and it's something that a number of trees across the UK are signing up for. And Trees for Cities is representative for Tree Cities of the World initiative in the UK. So we're engaging with all of our city partners to encourage them to sign up to 5 key principles. And this is a recognition of putting Bexhill on the map. If they get accepted into the Tree Cities of the World, it's a very strong set of principles, many of which are either happening now and you've already got in place, and some of it's just making sure that. So these 5 key principles are probably already in place. They're not completed, they're not underway, but it's looking at sort of establishing that you are responsible as a council for the trees in your remit, and making sure that there's a clear statement of that commitment. Also, it asks that you set the rules around what the policy is within the council to govern the protection of the trees in the council. And what we're already doing with economics and with urban forest research is knowing what you have, and you already have, I know, some data already, but it's making sure that you know what trees you've got under your remit, allocating resources if you've got budgets that you can set aside for it, to make those clear and to set those to make a clear statement of what budget you have, and then to celebrate the achievements through celebrations of trees. For instance, there's an annual tree week in November, so perhaps you can join in with that, and certainly we can help kickstart that annual event with our summer event next year. And thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Polly, I'm looking at you because you're a tree person
I am a tree person.
and a green
Thank you.
councillor, so I thought, right, you can kick off.
I think Danny and Kate know that I've been involved, first of all, long before this, we planted 550 trees up on Bexhill Down, which we regularly mulch every fortnight and look after, underplanted with wildflower. And there's a plan to plant another 220 this November. And also we've planted hundreds of trees up at Bexhill Cemetery, which we regularly look after as well. So I was well into trees before this, and I've done quite a few plots for you. Gosh, they are random. Some of them are on people's roofs, in people's back gardens. But what worries me most, 2 things have come up really, is the terrible neglect of some of the places I've been to. One of the worst was Sidley Wood, which is a lovely small woodland on the edge of that recreation ground. And it's just so neglected. It's owned by Rother, as I found out, but it contains oak trees, which are thriving, ancient oak trees. It has ash trees, which have all got ash driver and all seriously dying. And it's got hazel trees, which should be regularly, what's the word? Coppiced, that's the word, thank you. I didn't say apologise, I knew that was wrong. And they've not been coppiced in years, so they've all fallen over, and they're probably the length of these hills, they've fallen over. So it's in a chronic state of neglect. And the other place that was terribly neglected was Cruden Moat. Does anyone know Cruden Moat? It's an ancient historic site, medieval moat. It's on at the end of Clapping Walk, down there. And Don and I had to do a plot there. We had to wade through mountains of brambles, and it's just become totally neglected. And this huge World War II concrete bunkers just been dumped in the road, and it just looks terrible. And it's a listed site. This is dark. So what I'm trying to say is we don't look after the places we have got. And also, if anyone lives in Bexhill knows the Holgrove. I go there almost every day. Holgrove has about 20 or 30 trees. I'd say nearly all of them are dying because they're the wrong trees in the wrong place. And it's really sad. They've got little plants, but people have planted trees in them. There's just very few species that will survive in such an environment. And there's strong winds, salty air. We've really got to plant the right trees in the right place. So thank you for doing it. It's a brilliant project.
Yep, please do. Yep.
So Suzanne mentioned the summer events. They're quite open to interpretation. So they don't have to be a kind of all singing, bells and whistles event. What they could be is woodland maintenance. So what we're actually really good at is getting, whether it's local people involved or corporates involved, to start to help to maintain the existing site. So we hear this a lot, that why should we plant more trees when we can't manage the sites we've got? This is very, very common. And actually, with the timing of this project, what could work really nicely is that while Kate and Danny and their teams are doing the opportunity mapping and looking at planting sites. We'd be keen to come in and start to engage the community about where they will be planting trees, but also to get them involved in trees that are currently there. So I think these sound like really good sites where we could potentially do some copsing, do some clearance, do some work in some of those existing sites, and start to kind of raise awareness of the project that's coming. So that could actually work really nicely together. But we didn't use a couple of names of those sites actually.
Councillor Barnes, you.
Yes, I grew up in two seaside towns, one virtually without trees, the other with quite a lot of tree cover. The second one, Plymouth, was perhaps rather more sheltered. Newquay was exposed to the Atlantic gales. Getting the right trees, as Polly says, is absolutely crucial in a seaside town. I'm so supportive of this project that what I'm going to say is going to sound critical, but we moved very quickly, it seemed to me, from tree-lined streets to actually putting trees into existing green areas. A major challenge for us, it seems to me, is to persuade the Highways Authority that tree-lined streets are a good idea. We've got acres of them in Bexhill. If you really wanted to make this town even more beautiful than it is, then tree-lined streets are the answer. But of course, the Highways Authority is worried about them. There's the effect on pavements. You have to maintain them, and as I know from Burwash, the residents want to maintain them. The Highways Authority says, you haven't got the insurance. You haven't got the safety certificates. So there are all kinds of interesting problems if we take that particular area. At the other end of the scale, obviously, we can encourage people to plant in their own gardens again. Because this is bungalow land, we have very large gardens for relatively little house cover in certain parts of this borough. So encouraging more planting of trees. That, in a sense, is an easy one. It's about education, it's about persuasion, and we can do it. The intervening one is also quite interesting because in Etchingham we put in a Jubilee Wood to celebrate the last Jubilee of the Queen. And of course, it does take a certain degree of maintenance. You lose trees. You have again to remove the shelter around the trees because otherwise it starts constricting trunks. So it does take quite a lot of a volunteer force to keep it going. So I think we do need to focus strongly on three separate approaches to those three different types of terrain. And by far the most difficult, the one where I think the district council probably needs to concentrate most of its effort, is negotiating with East Sussex County Council to actually get tree-lined streets, because that will be the big gain. Everywhere else, I think, to an extent, we're pushing at an open door. And the important problem with some of our green spaces is, although we'd like to get them lined with trees, obviously sports pitches, you can't plant trees in the middle of. I point out the obvious. But it is quite important to realise that the space is important to beauty as well as the trees themselves. So it's on the streets I'd like to concentrate a lot of attention because I think East Sussex is going to take a lot of persuasion.
Yeah, I would assume that's why we have the four experts here to do that negotiating for us and to find the correct trees. Which, Kate?
Yeah. So we also have another bid that we haven't had an outcome for yet, and that was I was liaising with Rother District Council, well, with East Sussex County Council through Rother District Council. So we are waiting on an outcome from the Urban Tree Challenge Fund for planting in verges on Highways land. So if you could keep your fingers crossed, then we might have some good news for you on that front. The difference with that sort of planting is and the Green Recovery Challenge Fund is that the Green Recovery Challenge is more about economic recovery, jobs and skills. And so as part of this project, we're really keen that local people can get directly involved in the planting. And obviously there's issues with that on highways land. So we're keen to sort of keep those separate and get the community involved through this. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do some planting if that funding is successful. And I hope to hear you speak. I've been saying that for a while now, but hopefully there'll be good news on that score soon, which would be really fantastic for the area.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, you wish to come back?
Just two quick things to address Councillor Barnes' issue
Is that
about.
your machine?
Shall I do this one? Councillor Barnes' issue about street trees. We have already been planting a few street trees. Cranston Rise, which is off Cranston Avenue, before pandemic, together with Beg, we got a group from East Sussex. There's a very helpful officer at East Sussex called James Newmark, who actually studied biodiversity at university, so he's very much into this. He has the map of all the underground surfaces, so he comes along and tells us exactly where we can dig. It's much better than vast verges, obviously. And then we ask the people who live in the houses opposite if they will help look after the trees. So we've planted lovely flowering trees all up this avenue. This was about 2-3 years ago. So we have made a start, and it is possible. And I was going to say something else.
Good. Councillor Coleman.
Yeah, thank you. And I think everyone here sees the importance of planting more trees. And in Sidley, as Polly referenced, the ward that myself and Councillor Carroll represent, we are the highest ward in terms of multiple index of deprivation in the area. But also, I think you'll find that Sidley's got one of the greatest community spirits. It's got one of the most sort of active populations of young people and people who are really keen to get involved. Quite a few of the local sort of environmental charities and organisations spurn from Sidley and grow outwards. And I think it is a really good thing that this is happening. The one thing I was going to ask about was in terms of linking up with these sort of incredible edible projects and things like that that are going on. Is there any looking at sort of fruit trees and trees that actually produce food as well as the air that we breathe? Because I think, especially in an area like Sidley, for example, if there was some sort of community orchard or some sort of place where eventually young people and people of all ages could go, I planted that tree and now I'm able to make an apple pie with the fruits, that'd be great.
Exactly. I mean, that's what the community engagement process would be about. Would you like an orchard? Where would you like it to go? What communities would benefit from it? And who would look after it? Who would harvest the fruit? It's having those conversations and then putting them into action. So yeah, great ideas. It sounds like you're right. Really good track.
Anyone else? Councillor Mooney.
Yes, well, planting the trees, of course, is one thing, but maintaining them over the life of the tree is something huge. Now, I did pick up where you said other district councils, doctors had, because they're taking it to the lands, etc. But they don't do it for nothing, obviously. So where does the funding come from? Is this funding ongoing, or is it just for the time you're setting it up?
So this project is an 18-month funded period, but the funding will cover planting and establishment. So, and any trees that Trees for Cities plants, any standard trees, we would maintain them for the first 3 years until they're established. After that, then yes, we do hand it back to the landowner because it makes more sense to do that. But the critical thing, I think, is that by engaging the community in the planting, you're really helping to build that maintenance picture as well, so that it's not. It is the responsibility of the landowner in the long run, but if you engage the community, then you've got eyes and ears out there helping to let you know if there is any tree pest or disease happening, or any vandalism, or even getting tree theft is happening now. People are even kind of stealing whips and things. So by taking that community approach and by linking it with skills training and really being active about the planting, we're not just going to turn up, stick them in the ground and go, because that's when problems start. But we are, we have a strong track record of doing this. We've been around for nearly 30 years and we've planted 1.2 million trees, and we have a really good track record of working in places where there are other social issues happening, and yeah, I mean, yes, Suzanne is looking at that.
I mean, just in 3 years, a 3-year post-planting maintenance period is considerably longer than you would normally get. Often it's 1 year or maybe 2 years maximum. So we hope then that the need for that intensive maintenance up front becomes less over those 3 years, and it helps to, if a tree does fail for whatever reason, then we look at that. We've got that 3-year period to assess why it's died, see what species in place, and it gets replaced. So yeah, that's a longer than usual.
Councillor Errington.
Hi, thank you very much. One thing you did mention was that you wanted them all to be British and locally sourced. What happens if you can't do that? I'm thinking, for example, in Edgerton Park, we've got something called a Salix abelbrexensis, also known as the German Justina, and they had to come from Germany because of the size that was needed and because of the problems that we have down there in terms of what we had to have. So I was really excited by the fact it would be British and local, but I just wonder how realistic that is in view of what type of trees we've got to have.
It's British and as local as possible. So if you can't, it's to try and keep the provenance in the UK. But yeah, I mean, ideally what we would do is we would scope out what species are available within our new nurseries and then just look at what stock they've got. We try, so for instance, we've got our stock reserved, we've reserved it sort of 6 months ago for this year's planting season. So it's anticipating what stock is needed, what tree species are needed, and then scoping that out. And if it's not available, the specific species isn't available, we'd look and get a different species that is available that we know will work in the kind of environment here. But I think as part of the stipulation for this funding, Kate, correct me if I'm wrong, it probably does need to sort of sit within what's called a plant healthy. It comes with a plant healthy nursery, which has got provenance and has to avoid all local pests and diseases. So mostly British.
But not all native. They don't all have to be native species. So it's about right tree and right coat, that doesn't have to be British native species. So that's
British
a
source.
distinction.
Yeah.
I think eucalyptus grow like crazy, but you're not the best thing, are they? My wife planted one in the old house, and it got to about 60 foot tall. I had to cut it down. It was only there about 5 years. Councillor Cook.
Thank you very much. Just 3 short questions. Do you only support communities of deprivation? Do you only support the planting of trees, or do you support the planting of hedges too? And do you only support cities, or do you also support rural communities?
Yes, only deprived. We look at indices of multiple deprivation, and we do target people, places where there is need, essentially, whether that's low canopy cover, high deprivation, or both. What was the second one? No, we will plant hedges. Very happy to plant hedges. Hedges have all sorts of fantastic value, biodiversity, wildlife. I mean, with this project, we are looking at canopy cover, so we would want to blend hedges with tree planting as well. But if a hedge is suitable for a space, then I think it's a fantastic thing to do. So we would be very happy to do that. And sorry, what was the third one?
Do you only support cities, or do you support rural
not
communities as well?
Not rural, but we work in towns and cities, but not in rural. There are lots of other tree planting charities and tree planting who tend to focus on more rural areas. So rather than competing, that's our expertise. Yeah, that's how we focus. Yeah.
Deborah, you wanted to come in?
Oh, thank you. Yes, it was just really to remind people that this wonderful project team have got to go at 7:15. Yeah, so I'm just close to time. And I was just going to add, in answer to one of the council's questions, is one of the reasons why they're doing a guidance book that can be put on the shelf, which will have all these species that we should be working to. So when the team are finished, we'll be able to pick that up off the shelf and use it in the future. So the information won't be lost, it will be there, and we'll be able to work in the longer term maintenance after the 3 years, maintaining them with the help of officers and volunteers. So it's building that community spirit and maintaining that and keeping it going, along with the guidance book that they're doing, which would be very useful to keep on the shelf. I wanted to say that.
Thank you. Well, if we're all done and it's 15:15, then I think we should say thank you to Danielle, Kate and Susanna. And if you want to get going, catch that train.
Thank you all very
Thank
much. Pleasure.
And,
Thank you.
Don't forget your coat because it's a bit wet outside. All right. Right. Thank you. Okay, Deborah, back to you.
Shall I continue on? Thank you very
Yeah.
much for listening to the project presenters. Hope you found it interesting. Going on with the report, it talks about the carbon literacy training that we have all undergone, or a lot of us have undergone, senior managers and councillors. And then moving on to council contractor progress, we've been making sure that climate change and the environment is at the top of our list when we're working with contractors, whichever size and scale, but most particularly waste collection, street and beach cleansing contract. We're working on with a consultant, Hester Consultants, to talk about how we can improve the fleet and make it less carbon emissions from the actual vehicles that drive around our district. So that's an ongoing project there. We've just had the inception meeting, so that's all in progress now. And they will be delivering in time to come a business case that we will be able to make decisions on whether we go hydro treated vegetable oil, that's right, or electric or hydrogen, all the various different concepts there. The ID Birdie grounds maintenance contract, another one that's top of our list. We're going through the extension period at the moment, negotiating extension and looking how we can improve that from the environment point of view. I'm hoping that they will come and talk to us at some stage about what they can do in the future on that contract. Freedom Leisure Centre contract, that has been renewed, and they've been able to make some carbon savings in terms of kilowatt hours electricity that they're using. That's in the report. And then in general grounds maintenance, we've been piloting areas of longer grass, environmental grasses to promote the growth of wildflowers. And that's been very interesting. We've had some good customer feedback on that. And it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it has worked very well. And so we'll be looking at more opportunities to do that going forwards in the future. We've also looked at, as part of the Task and Finish group, long stay car parks, encouraging people not to come into town so much, but park on the outskirts. So we're offering them a cheaper rate for all-day parking to encourage that. And then just finishing with the local plan review, the planning system to achieve a sustainable development. Interventions through planning policy are essential to support the delivery of the environment strategy. And my colleague has put a paragraph in there in the report about progress made there. And then we've made a lot of progress within the council, changes to buildings such as solar panels and energy efficient windows and roofs. We're using 100% renewable energy supplier for our electricity and gas. Staff, more opportunities to work from home, which has cut down on travel, and schemes to encourage greener travel. Continuing with Microsoft meetings, where they're non-decision meetings, and a variety of other factors there that we've worked on. And then I think Ben is going to talk a little bit about next steps. If that's all right, I'll hand over to Ben.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Deborah. So in terms of next steps, obviously you'll be aware that the the Environment and Policy Manager left us earlier in the summer. We are looking to redeploy that budget into two separate areas. The first of which is a dedicated projects officer, looking at both sort of taking our baseline carbon footprint, which we're under the process of establishing now as part of the KPI set for next year, and into introducing projects and schemes that are focused directly on reducing the organisational carbon footprint. I think it's important that we lead as an example, and the best way to do that is for us to have a dedicated officer who focuses their job on introducing and delivering projects that directly reduce the organisation's carbon footprint. The other part is looking to utilise the remaining budget to, at this point in time, to better inform the development of the local plan, which obviously has long-lasting implications in terms of our policy development for new homes and our placemaking approach long into the future. So I think it's, we're at that critical juncture now with the local plan where those policies need to be both forward-thinking and right to make sure that we have an sort of environmentally positive legacy well into the future when it comes to things like our building standards and the way we think about placemaking as part of any developments into the future. That being said, what we have to recognise is that there is a limited budget available to deliver on this. So I think in terms of the way we focus that, I think this is the early stage of the programme, not forgetting that we're looking to sort of deliver this by 2030. The local plan development won't take more than another couple of years to get those policies in place, at which point we can then look to see how we utilise that budget for the remaining 7 years of that programme to make sure that we're embedding those principles. So the person we'll be looking for that will be something different from what we may be looking for now. And I think we just have to be a bit more dynamic with how we deploy that budget and think about it over the term rather than trying to do everything now. Focus on what we can achieve with that now and then see how we deliver the other bits in the latter stages. The one thing I would say is none of that's set in stone. We are looking to bring forward, establish reconvene the climate change steering group to make sure we get approval on the next steps before those are introduced.
Thank you. I suppose to a degree you could say we sort of missed a trick, if you like, because when we sort of started this climate emergency, we had the sort of baseline in place then, which might have been here, and then COVID turned up. None of us came anywhere near this town hall for like 18 months, and all meetings are on Zoom. So our mileage claims were plummeted, so therefore car use plummeted, staff working from home, staff working in different ways. That could have looked really good. Our baseline would have been here, and all of a sudden our usage would have been right down here. It probably sort of raised up a bit. So whether it's a good thing that we didn't do it or not, I don't know really. Because all of a sudden we'd be back on a rise again, sort of getting to a different level. But
no, it's a fair point. It's a fair point. I think other than, unfortunately though, other than the mileage, not which obviously does make its impact, the building has still been heated throughout the winter. Unfortunately, the way that the heating is designed is it's either on or off, and if it's on, it's really on.
yeah. I suppose the same with the leisure centres. You can't just shut them down because they'll just seize up and go mouldy. That's advanced.
Yes, I think probably I'm pushing at an open door for something that Ben said, but I think I'm still disappointed that while we've got a very fair idea at the leisure centre of what the baseline was in 2019, I've yet to see any figures for our best baseline. What you've just said about cars is fascinating because I don't know whether we can estimate what the baseline for travel was in 2019 and see what it is now and see how we can maintain something much closer to the current baseline than the one that we had then. County have calculated quite a major saving in carbon solely from workplace and council travel. And they know precisely how much they've saved. Ben's quite right, of course, this building is, I'd like to know what the baseline is for the emissions here and some of the things around that and any other buildings that we own, really quite important. We won't get to 2030, of course, if we don't influence the community as well. And here, when you're talking about workplace alteration, there was quite an important goal which was laid down in the climate strategy, and I imagine we've made limited progress because, again, we've lost key officers. But we were looking at the digital strategy for this area. Clearly, the better we are at that, the less trouble we have to make. And it is interesting, sitting as I do as an occasional member of the planning committee, see the number of home offices coming forward, which again is going, obviously, but we've no way of knowing the degree of progress we're making because we have very limited information on what we were actually doing beforehand, either as a council or indeed as a community. So we think we're going in the right direction. We almost certainly are going in the right direction. But it'd be nice to get to some idea of how far we've got to go and how quickly we're getting there. Number of things which I think we probably need to address what's on the website. I think we need to say more about other types of propulsion than electric. When you read through our climate strategy, electric comes up over and over again. Yet we know that the battery technology for heavy vehicles, like waste collection vehicles, buses, trains, will almost certainly not be electric. It will almost certainly be some other form of propulsion with a better weight to power ratio. So that's quite an important slight shift in emphasis. Again, one of the things I sat on the climate review group at county, and one of the things we were worried about is the sheer pressure there is going to be on the grid if everything goes electric. So again, having a rather more diverse approach to what we're seeking to do is quite important. The other thing which again feeds into our local plan is making sure that we put the proper insulation requirements into new building and as far as possible go for timber construction because we can locally source the timber which saves on travel and again it's a good step towards carbon neutrality. But how are we going to get people to retrofit? Because basically our existing housing stock is probably creating huge amounts of emission. And particularly some of the Victorian stuff and the Edwardian stuff. And we've got somehow to find a way of incentivizing people to do something about that. A whole range of other comments I could make, but I think it's good to have this review. We're going to have it annually. I think we need to go through systematically the goals that we've set down and work out how they need to be refined. But the starting point has got to be the baseline.
Yeah, I think on housing, you're probably looking the building regs, which are national set building regs, are what people work to. The trouble is that the industry works to a minimum. You know, they work, and they have done. They work to a minimum standard to get it through building regs, and I think that is probably changing. People are probably looking now and saying, well, no, let's go to the maximum or above. And you get more money for it, or you make it more sellable. That's I think the industry is changing there. You know, when did mine, I sort of invested extra money. I thought, well, I'm the one with it. I'm the one paying the electric bill and the heating bill. So it's worth my time and my money to make it as efficient as possible. So I went to the triple glazing, and I upped the spec on the roof and upped the spec under the floor and made the walls a bit thicker. So that's all part and parcel. It's easy when you do it. But our biggest problem, you know, in Rye and Winchelsea, parts of Bexhill and Robertsbridge and everywhere else, where you've got listed buildings, you know, you can't even paint the front door out getting planning permission. So, you know, double glazed windows is a no-no. Secondary double glazing is hard work. Doing any sort of retrofit inside, someone will fall over and you know, take the court and say, and I think that's where change is going to have to come in from someone to actually sort of, you know, get with the program. I've got a building in Rye, listed area, single glazed windows. Now I could change those windows to double glazed; they wouldn't look any different at all. But I couldn't do it. And yeah, and that's a silly thing. So you can't improve your stock because of rules and regulations. And rules and regulations need to change. You know, I get it that you don't get a half timbered house from a Tudor house covered with silver foil and window. You know, you can't do that. But there's ways and means around it. You speak to people and they say, oh, you can get, you know, super thin double glazing now with argon and all the rest of it that is better. But we won't even allow anybody to do it. You know, I speak to folks in the trade and they say, oh, that window there, you made me splice it out. It's not to splice it out. What's that all about? And you think, I know, because 10 years ago, I took the same window out and chucked it away and put a new one in, purpose-made joinery. What people have done for the last 400 years. When something's wrong, put a new one in. It looks exactly the same once they go to paint. It's the same thing. It's made of timber. It's good glass. It's the window. It's been around for thousands of years.
I agree with a lot of what there are. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but there are schemes. Mike Slavin, a very good engineer friend of mine, came up with an insulation scheme for Rye. But how do you push that in a community? Again, there are other things we really need to be thinking quite hard about. Collective heating schemes. Not every house, particularly those that are listed, can have solar panels. But we ought to be able to create on some of our public buildings solar panels that heat an area rather than simply the building itself. And so there are all kinds of things like that, which we as community leaders should be pushing. Some of it will have to be done through the LGA. I agree with you about national building rates. But there is quite a bit we can do ourselves by organising the community properly and by leading it properly, which might help us.
Catherine, you want to speak and Councillor Bayliss, do you want to move on to the end of the table rather than sitting there behind as I've invited you to the meeting? You want to take a proper seat.
Thank you. Gosh, promotion. Thank you.
Christine, that's it.
I did just want to comment, if I may, specifically and generally. I think one of the things we forget, that gets lost in the mist of times, is that when our beautiful buildings in conservation areas were built, they were fit for purpose. Now they aren't fit for 21st century purpose. And one of the reasons we love our higgledy-piggledy mixtures of buildings in our current conservation areas is because they are just that. And I really passionately believe, I've had many robust exchanges of views with conservationists on this subject, but we don't pickle our buildings. We have to make them fit for purpose if we're going to preserve them and live in them. And I fully take your point, and I think we can do an awful lot as a council with our planning rules and our planning policies to make sure that people in listed buildings can retrofit their buildings. And the other big problem with retrofitting is, of course, persuading registered, whatever they're called, housing associations to spend a lot of money on retrofitting their premises too. They're very good at building modern buildings which fit the government's minima. I don't think they would necessarily fit our ideal requirements, but getting them to retrofit is a whole different matter. And I do remember Tim Hickling saying, the thing about affordable housing, Councillor, is not what it costs to buy, it's how much it costs to live in it. And I think that was a lesson very well made, and we need to remember that. But more generally, yes, I'm so glad we're moving on to having some benchmarking so we can know where we're going. And more importantly, so the public can monitor us and know where we are going. But I was talking earlier, before we start, to Councillor Errington, who really brought something into sharp focus. This isn't something we should be doing to people. It is something we should be doing with people because they want to do it. And people have been asking me, what can I do as myself in my little home to make a difference? Well, there's lots of things you can do, and I won't bore you with it now. But looking around this council chamber, I would say we did some time ago start with a great flourish a paperless pledge. Now, I am paperless. I often sit in meetings looking like I'm texting, but in fact I'm taking notes on my mobile phone. I don't have paper about my person, and I very rarely use it. And I do think that we have to be role models in this, and we have to put our money where our mouth is, or walk the walk, or however you want to say it. If we have a paperless pledge, we shouldn't be using paper. So yes, we do need to get people with us. I think we know really what they might want, but we don't know specifically what they want. We had the training some time ago which said if you really want people to cooperate, you've got to get the message to the right group of people in a way that they will understand and they are emotionally connected with. And I believe you and I then talked about a company which does that. So it's about more than just the strategic things. It's about being role models and making sure that we do what we're saying that they have to do and helping people do it with us. Because if they don't do it with us, it won't.
Yeah, I'm paperless. I've got a pen for some reason. I haven't got anything to write on. I've even got a blooming nib out. Maybe it's satisfaction. Did you want to come back in on something?
I was just a couple of points that actually fits in with both what Councillor Field and Councillor Barnes said, particularly around the baselining. I think provisional look at it, we think we probably have enough data to backdate our carbon baselining to before the pandemic, even though obviously we're starting it now. We've got enough data, particularly organisationally, to backdate it. I mean, we don't have any exact figures on how many people worked from home before the pandemic, but I can promise you it was probably no more than a handful, particularly from this organisation. We weren't very forward thinking in terms of deploying that remote working. So whether or not we attribute it to the pandemic or to our drive for environmental improvements, probably a bit of both. In fact, the pandemic, whilst the ambition was there, the pandemic probably assisted in accelerating the delivery of that. We've gone from basically a workforce that was in the office 5 days a week at their desks to one, as you see from here today, that is almost 80-90% remote at the moment, and I think there's an opportunity to really capture that benefit. In terms of the district footprint, for those of us who went on the carbon literacy training, there was a really interesting tool where they'd used historic data and current data to sort of. It's never going to be an exact science with this sort of geography, but a very reasonable estimation of what our district carbon footprint is, both carbon footprint that emanates directly from our district and then from people who live there. I think there was one example somewhere in mid-Devon, isn't it, something like that, that has the M4 running right through the middle of it. So, the people who live there don't generate an awful lot of carbon, but the M4 generates quite a significant amount. I think it's the M5 actually, isn't it, goes through there. So that provides a number of different statistics that we can use and going forward. And the other thing what you talk about is the energy efficiency in homes, and you're right. That's I think even central government now are waking up to the fact that that's one of the key drivers and one of the things that has to be tackled in terms of our addressing the national carbon challenges that they've put forward. And I think what we will start to see is in the coming years national programs that seem to help homeowners address that. There is the latest round of the retrofit funding, which was focused primarily at council stock and RPs. And I know Optivo, as our largest stockholder, did submit some bids for that. So I don't know what the outcomes of those are yet, but they are looking to introduce a retrofit program that will target primarily those in fuel poverty to begin with, and then obviously expand out to other areas.
I think it'll be fair to Optivo. In my patch in Iden and Claydon, Optivo, a lot of their houses, because there's no gas in Iden or Claydon, so the houses or the Optivo stock was on storage heaters. They took all those out, put in air source heat pump, and put 4 kilowatts of electricity photovoltaic on the roof to run it. So they to invest, and that was probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago they did that. They're still doing the odd way every now and again. You see a scaffold up. So they've done a bit to assist people. And I was speaking to a chap who lived in one, and he said his electricity bill literally plummeted. He said the house is warm when it floods. They did a bit of change the windows, update the windows and stuff. But, so it can work. Now who have I got? I've got a bit of paper. So I've got Councillor Cook first, and then.
Just a very quick comment, because most of the things I was going to say have already been said. But if we're going to lead by example, we need to shout about it when we do. We need to be much, much better at leading loudly by example as well. All others follow. And maybe looking at some of our other buildings, apart from just this. I mean, I'm not entirely sure where they are, but seeing what we can do for them as well, rather than just this one. Thank you.
Councillor Paul.
Yeah, I think Councillor Field hit the nail on the head when she talked about us being community leaders. And I think one of the things, first of all, the climate change steering group needs to meet more regularly, and because I think where there is perhaps some fall behind, where we've sort of lost staff and we're sort of trying to regain stuff from the council side of things, I think members, especially on that group, are very keen and very willing to lend their hand to help where we can. For example, perhaps the steering group could have done a survey of members independently of any sort of staff resource to find out members' individual carbon footprints. And that could have been something that members could have then said to their communities, well, I've just found out that my carbon footprint is roughly X, and I'm going to try and reduce it to Y by next year. Things like that can happen independent of council resources, which is all just about us taking responsibility as individuals, championing champions within our community, and things like that. All of those things don't take council resources necessarily, because we're not going to be putting out leaflets, because that would be counterproductive to the whole climate sort of aim. But all those things where we can take part as individuals, I think that needs to be led from the steering group, and can be led from the steering group, because I think we're all keen to sit around a table and come up with ideas and put things together that would maybe take some pressure off Deborah, Ben, and others who are sort of working tirelessly to get this done, plus all the other things that we're doing as a council.
Councillor Mooney.
I have to say that Councillor Barnes and, of course, Councillor Field brought it up as well. It's hugely beneficial if we say that 2030, when we're going to be carbon neutral, we'll have achieved 100%. Where are we now, and how are we progressing? And I think we're going to meet and give information every 6 months. I think that's what we agreed at the previous meetings. That would be hugely helpful. And I know, Ben, you referred to it, and you some figures on it, so as we know exactly where we are. Because come 2029, and we've only achieved something like 50%, that would be disastrous, wouldn't it? That's what I think. Sorry.
Well, not really. Can you answer that, Deborah? No, not really.
We have a footprint or a baseline or a figure for each, and then we do an average.
I think that's currently being worked on.
Yeah, I mean, you referred to it in your discourse that maybe you could backtrack and see where we start, where we've come from. And so basically, we want to know where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the baselining exercise is to sort of, I think had it just been a normal 18 months, then we probably just would have baselined where we are today. But I think it's important to baseline where we were 2 years ago to sort of establish both the effect of what we've been through over the last 2 years on our activity, as well as the planned interventions that we're going to be bringing forward as well, so we can really monitor what the impact of what it is we're doing, as well as what the overall of what we're trying to achieve.
That's a balance.
Yes, I think that's have a shot, because once you've got figures, oddly enough, if people think they're bad and explain why they're bad, you can improve them. If you don't actually put anything out there for discussion, then you have nothing at all. It's not a case that bad figures they're better than no figures, rather than the reverse, because critics then go to work and explain why they're bad, and you can improve on them.
Councillor Coulter.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Gray and myself had the privilege of attending the local government climate action conference before last, and we are planning to put a report together for the climate change steering group, which presents a few additional ideas on what's happening at the moment. I mean, I'm very impressed with that this evening. Very impressed with the tree plans. Great news concerning the decarbonisation of housing stock, and it's very encouraging to hear that retrofitting is beginning to happen within the Optivo housing stock. There were a few other ideas put forward. Oxford City Council was talking about battery storage for green energy. The London Borough of Haringey was talking about having EV charging points on lamp columns. Sorry, they've already done this, as well as electrifying their fleet, as well as introducing cargo bikes for deliveries. There was another group of councils working on the Clean Air Villages directory, where over 80% of an area's stock has either electric or low emission vehicles. Cornwall Council was talking about ecotourism. So there is a range of ideas that have already been implemented, and we could just piggyback on if we consider them viable. The model basically being put forward on electric vehicles was that if you take capital expenditure and running costs into account, break even happens fairly soon, and then you've actually got a financial advantage fairly early on into the term of the vehicle. I haven't got figures. This broad picture was made. I've just given you a taster now, but Councillor Gray and I will submit a report which hopefully will help you to progress or address it. One area that was covered was the engineer training, which what was suggested was that the government has a target of 600,000 heat pumps across the UK. Have we got the engineers to do this? And if we can work with the academic sector to provide, to encourage the training, it will help with retrofitting. Another area, of course, was carbon literacy for all staff of all authorities. And I would just like to point out that only 12 of the 38 councillors have had carbon literacy training so far, and I gather only a very small number of the 230 or so staff within Rother Council, and so we have some way to go there. And do we have the budget to do it? Very encouraging to hear that lots of funding were being addressed, which was something which was emphasised quite a lot at the conference.
I obviously thank the councillors for their efforts involved. I mean, and many of the examples and the projects you outlined there are, would absolutely work towards contributing towards lessening our carbon footprint district-wide. I think one of the key, the only thing I'd probably say in comparison in regards to that list is we probably need to, 3 times the annual functioning budget of this council to even begin to chomp into a lot of those schemes, particularly things like the installation of EV charging points through lamp columns would need a significant upgrade to the entire electrical system that powers our lights, our street lights at the moment. Whilst what we have to do is we have to be, I think, realistic in what we can achieve at the district level, and be ambitious and really stretch ourselves with the resources that we have. But we have to have those resources in mind when we enter into these things, and recognise that we can't do it all from day one, and that we really have to focus in on what we can achieve and make some early gains, and then look at the later part of the programme about what we can maybe do in partnership with other councils, what government funding streams may come along, and be in a position to take advantage of those as and when they happen, which I'm sure they will. In time, I'm sure that the national discourse is now very much one of improving our impact on this planet, and I'm sure government funding will follow in line with that. So we just need to make sure that we're in a position to take advantage of those things when they come along, but utilise our resources as best we can in the early stages of this programme.
Holly, do you want to come back?
Just very quickly, just to follow on from it's always very interesting to see how other councils. And one of the most interesting presentations that we attended last week was Lewis Council, and Zoe Nicholson is the lead council there. And what has been amazing things in Lewis, which isn't a million miles different from what they have very similar areas. And they're looking at, I thought you'd like this council, they're looking at it's not quite prefab houses, but they're looking at housing units that have been very successful. And also, the loads of things they're doing, but tarmac on the roads, they found a much greener tarmac that doesn't have the carbon footprint of what we've done. So just quite a lot of things that they're doing that are just making such a big difference. So just what we can learn from other countries.
Right, when everybody's done, we've got here resolved that progress being made be noted. So whilst you're there, Councillor Gray, do you want to move that? And the seconder, Councillor Coleman, everybody's happy with that? All in favour? That's carried, thank you very much.
Then we did make 1 or 2 suggestions came out, and I hope some of those can be passed through to Cabinet. Particularly, I would want the group to look at a range of vehicles rather than just electric vehicles in the strategy, because I think that tends to be misleading at the moment, and it isn't intended to be, I know.
No. Well, I think Deborah sort of covered that in that they're looking at more likely hydrogen vehicles, or even you call it chip fat, can't you? They used to run on different diesel. I did it.
Hydrogenated vegetable oil. That will be the thing for Rother probably with our rural area.
I used to do this biofuel in Rye Harbour, and I used it in my old van. And after about 3 weeks, the filter clogged up and used to run, so I had to go back to normal diesel. So there it is. Item 7, COVID recovery plan, an update. Melanie's not here, so.
Thank you, Chair. Just as Chairman notes, Melanie Powell, who's the lead officer on this subject, is unable to be here tonight. She would have given a much more interesting presentation than I will be. But in effect, back in November last year, Cabinet approved the Council's Economic Recovery Action Plan. This was a response to the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, and was broadly in line with the action plan presented by East Sussex County Council. Well, it wasn't East Sussex County Council, it was Team East Sussex, managed by East Sussex County Council. And what we tried to do is, in effect, take the East Sussex recovery strategy and digest that down into local actions that we as a district council could either promote, undertake ourselves, or lobby for in our capacity as a district council. And that was boiled down into the Appendix A, which is the recovery plan. What we've included in there is updates on the actions that have been taken as part of that. What we've tried to do is take advantage of any government funding that's come our way through that. So we've implemented both the the High Street Recovery Fund and the Welcome Back funding, both of which are designed to sort of get people back onto the high streets after sort of moving into a more remote shopping way. And so, what we'll have to do at the moment is obviously Councillor Bayliss and myself have to take any questions that people may have on the actions that have been undertaken on the ambitions in the action plan.
Thank you. Councillor Bayliss, you wish to comment? I'm sure you do. Can you switch your machine on?
Yes, thank you to Ben for a good synopsis of the paper. I'd like to start off by actually saying thank you to Councillor Cook from Battle, and also Councillor Stevens from Rye, who we've worked together, the three of us, on quite a lot of the projects in the COVID recovery. And this has been a sort of joint, if you like, a cross-party effort, utilising the monies that we've received from government, and we've used some of the money from the Town Centre Steering Group in Bexhill-on-Sea. But overall, this has been a district-wide approach. We have made some tweaks. So, for example, in the annexes you'll find a report into the work that we did in Central Ward last Christmas on promoting a return to the high street for Christmas shopping. And we utilised some of the information from that to invest in training for retailers. We did a map. We worked with the Chamber of Commerce to put together a sort of free parking map, which was picking up some of the issues. But quite interestingly, when we came to look at the reopening, the welcome back funding that was divvied up from the government in this last summer, I think it arrived about May time. One of the issues that we found when we talked to businesses in Rye was that the poster campaign, the Shop Local campaign, didn't work as well as it had done in Bexhill, or wasn't working as well in Bexhill. And in Rye, that's because they already have quite a good tourist business. I mean, I gave a presentation to Rye Chamber of Commerce on Friday evening, and they were saying, their visitor numbers was up, and in lots of ways exceeded, because of the staycation market, numbers. So actually, that sort of poster campaign didn't work as well in Rye as it did in Bexhill, where the main focus of the Bexhill campaign was about persuading local people in Bexhill to actually come back into the high street and shop local, and to not, if you like, spend lots of money via Amazon, but actually shop local. And we have done quite a bit of work on making sure that online local is supported and is growing. So I'm happy to answer any questions. As I say, there's lots of little projects that flow out of here, the work that Councillor Coleman did in relation to setting up the nursery in Sidley. That is very much part of getting parents back into work post pandemic. You know, there's lots of little bits and pieces. The bus campaign that we've been working on, again, is all part of, you know, making sure that there are jobs and getting people into those jobs. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Our recommendation is the report we noted, and any further recommendations we refer to cabinet. So I would ask, do we have any further recommendations to add to this, or we feel it as it is? Councillor.
It's not so much a recommendation, but there are 2 points. One is, I think we need to look at the affordable childcare model in the light of the changes in working practice. I think it will still be essential, but I think it might be useful if some work is done to look, now that we've got more home working, what is really required. It's still vital to get the kids off to a flying start. So what I don't want to see is it killed off by home working, but we may need to tailor make it to the new working environment. The other thing I think we've got to be very aware of is the change to the retail world. And I think we've got to have a very conscious drive, bring people back into the centre of towns. And that will probably mean converting premises to accommodation. I think that's got to be part of our drive, because I don't think retail is going to go back to where it was. It was already changing. This has simply accelerated that change. So I think we've got to bring life back to our towns in different ways, rather than thinking simply we can revive the high street. And I think that's quite an important conceptual point.
Yeah, I was just going to say. I mean, we the district is lucky in terms of the makeup of our high streets. I think our high streets have fared very, very well. All three towns actually focused primarily on sort of smaller independent shops, rather than sort of relying on the big name brands that you might have experienced, like over at Hastings or in Eastbourne, which have suffered, I think, to a much greater degree than our high streets have. So I think in general terms, you're right. I think particularly maybe around Bexhill, we argue maybe our town centre, or we consider the town centre might be too large, and there might be some level of consolidation that's required. We'll be doing that review through the local plan process. But I think particularly in Battle and Rye, I think they've survived and thrived in many cases once they were allowed to reopen, and valued that in-person shopping experience that those centres offer in comparison to your bigger towns where you've maybe got your bigger brand name.
So have we got is that a further recommendation, I suppose? No, just a point.
I think it's quite important to look forward and thanks. There is a danger
Councillor. Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, thank you, thank you, Councillor. Well, actually, we did have the French market. It was in September, the normal time, and we actually this time had it in the Delaware car park, and it was very popular and very well received. One of the issues that did come up around the street markets was that the Sackville Road traders, which is a road often that people talk about having been forgotten, they were quite keen to hold a street market, but we couldn't do that because Sackville Road is actually a prohibited street. And so for the licensing committee, which is coming up, is it next Monday, week on Monday, there is a report to that, which is at my request to actually change Sackville Road from a prohibited street to a consent street. So we are picking up with all the issues that were raised where we can.
Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it shows how just a little bit of money from central government into local authorities can really help. Who would have thought it? But I think Councillor Barnes is right. We really do need to focus in on our high streets. We're very lucky in Rother, I think, Bexhill, Battle, Ryan, that we have very local shops, and that those local shops have been able to survive because they're a little bit smaller, they're a little bit more hardy, and they also have connections to the areas, whereas a big chain might just pull 12 stores and it doesn't really care in the greater scheme of things. You know, if you're Carroll's Greengrocers, for example, you know, you're part of the lifeblood of Bexhill, so you're going to stay there and you're going to try harder. And I think that's a real part of our success. And so championing those local shops and championing those sort of the local business is really important. I've been really glad to see that come to fruition in Bexhill. I think Council Bayliss has done incredible work in getting local residents to ditch the Jeff Bezos, Amazon, to ditch the sort of shopping deliveries to their door, and to actually go out into the town, especially those who live nearby shops, and to actually support local retailers. I think we do need to look at the high street in terms of how it's changing. It's changing its use. It's no longer you just go into the high street to pick up your essentials. Thriving high streets and thriving town centres have a more sort of leisure element to them. I see that Eastbourne have just set up a Ninja Warrior course in their shopping centre, as well as their new cinema, which is designed to bring people in for an activity, and then while they're there, the idea is that they shop. Bexhill very successfully on the seafront has got that new, it's like a 360-degree tour of the town. Sort of, yeah, amazing. Sort of artificial, modern technology stuff that I should be more au fait with as a young'un. And I think all of those ideas, those sorts of things, we're seeing escape rooms pop up here, there, and everywhere, need to be encouraged, need to be brought into our local areas, because one escape room in the middle of Rye leads to multiple escapes from hardship for the businesses next to those places. So I think that's a really important thing to look at. And the only other thing I was going to say was what we're doing now in Sidley very successfully is we're starting to see some of the shops in the high street build up just by one or two. So to put an extra flat above the shop premises, which gives the shop owners and the premises owners a little bit more income, as well as, you know, helping our housing situation and providing, you know, small homes for people that need them. And that just keeps those businesses a little bit more sustainable, keeps the rents a little bit cheaper, and it means that we can protect our high streets for a long time. So don't, as well as building out, as well as converting, also do think about building up as long as it's safe.
Sure, Councillor Mooney.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I'd like to commend Councillor Bayliss on this amazing piece of work that she's worked alongside with Melanie Powell. And very grateful that both Councillor Stevens and myself were involved in that, particularly in the very early days with our own towns. One of the things, I mean, unfortunately, we can't get away from Amazon. There are some things that we have to order online because we cannot get them in our local towns and villages. I'm thinking brownie uniform, a vast box of craft items needed for the brownies. What we need is some kind of community hub whereby we can go and collect these things. Now, you very successfully moved the Amazon lockers out of the co-op and put it outside Bexhill railway station. And I think that is fantastic because that is somewhere where people can go and collect their shopping. We had a very successful one in our local newsagents, and you could also have parcels delivered to them. And I think that is another area, if we want to regenerate our towns, that we need to promote perhaps, to let people know that facility is available, so people don't have to get in their cars, or you don't have to have 20 white vans driving down your cul-de-sac, delivering to lots of different people.
Sticks. Councillor Errington.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much, Councillor Bayes, for the work that you did last year. First question, are you going to do the same this year, sort of campaign, or?
What, you mean a Christmas campaign?
Yeah.
We are. It's on my list to talk to Ben on Friday, I think, when we have our regular catch-up meeting. We are. It is on my list. It's come up again, and now I've talked to Rye and I've talked to businesses in Bexhill. I think we're sort of clearer on what we need to do. So,
thank you. The other thing that was the theme that came up through the feedback that you got was about parking. Is there any way that we can actually promote the fact that there is free 2-hour parking in Bexhill? I just try and get across to my residents. Some people are adamant that they're principally not going to come in because you've got to pay to park, but you haven't. You need to get that message.
yeah. The Chamber of Commerce did a really, really good map. It was produced, actually, did some work with, Councillor Hollidge, who's now County Councillor, but he wasn't at the time. And we put together the free parking map for Bexhill. Now, I have suggested to the Chamber that maybe we run another print run of those, and we could perhaps run those out of our print room here, or we can sort of get the Bexhill Observer maybe to print that as a resource. But yes, that was the result of seeing so many people coming back on our survey saying, well, I'm not coming into Bexhill because there's nowhere to park now for free.
Councillor Stevens, you was part of this gang of free.
It was really good to be on this programme, and you said about the posters in Rye, they was a success because people were really happy that Rother cared about them. And I went round to nearly every shop in Rye, and I spoke to near enough all of them, told them all about the grants and everything, and they were really happy to be supported by Rother. So it wasn't all in vain. I know you say they've got a good thing anyway, but it was worthwhile. So I was really pleased to be part of it. Thank you.
Is that it? Good. Someone want to move the recommendation? Councillor Cook, seconder. Councillor Coleman. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Last item on the agenda, work programme. So 1810 we've done. 2211. You have to remind me, Ben, what did we change some? Got down anti-poverty update on the April.
On the April one, looking at possibly the anti-poverty update.
We've got the big one. We've got the homelessness strategy.
Yeah, we've got the homelessness strategy coming forward on the November.
These are some finance and performance report, revenue budget, council tax deduction. I think there's enough to get on with.
Draft anti-poverty.
Yeah, so January next year, well, draft revenue budget, so that takes some time. Quarterly, off-street car park must be finished with, and performance targets, nothing going on with there, I think. March, Crime and Disorder Committee received a report from the Community Safety Partnership. Performance report and the anti-poverty proposals there. Anything else anybody wants a consideration for? Generation Leisure Centre, corporate brand review, review of economic generation strategy, peer review, draft corporate customer services proposal. Yeah, strategy. Keep it as it is.
I think there is a litter strategy, a draft litter strategy coming to cabinet at the next cabinet meeting.
Right.
So that will be there. What I was going to say was obviously we've not really got much booked in for the 20th of April. That might be worth holding over as empty just in case something rises that needs to come to a review and scrutiny at some point. And I'm just conscious of things like the property investment strategy hasn't been reported for a while. That will be reported in the spring at some point. And there'll be some other bits that I'm sure.
Well, all of a sudden, that's 6 months away. Another update on the bottom.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if everybody's happy with that, that's how we keep it. I declare the meeting closed 8:15. Thank you very much.